Hello everybody, and welcome back to the new Mindscape. In this video, I'm going to go through the contributions of some of the main figures of the axial age, which I talked about in the previous video. So, I mentioned that the axial age took place around 800 to 200 BC, but there were some breakthroughs that even occurred before that, and perhaps the first axial breakthrough in the history of religion may have been with Moses, who is said to have lived in Egypt around 1300 BC. So that's actually earlier than the axial age, but the biblical story of Moses was written down based on earlier oral tales. It was written down during the axial age. So in the story, the biblical story of Moses split the Red Sea and freed the Hebrew slaves of Egypt from the Pharaoh, the emperor of Egypt. According to the story, the Egyptian pharaohs had turned the Hebrews into slaves. Moses received a revelation from God, who told him to bring his people to freedom in the promised land. God commanded him to take his people out of Egypt into the land of milk and honey. Moses replied to God, "How am I going to do that? I have nothing. I'm just a slave." God assured him that he only needed to have faith in God, with which he would be able to overcome the Pharaoh and lead his people to freedom. And that's what he did. Moses is considered to be one of the leading prophets of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i faith. What's revolutionary about the story of Moses is that all societies at that time had many different gods. They all had their own gods, and this is called polytheism, so many different gods. So just like in China, even now, each village has its own Tudigong, right, its own earth god. In fact, many earth gods. I've done research in a village in Guangdong where villagers not only worship their own earth god, but they also had many local gods, such as one of the local gods, her name was Auntie Cao Zu Niang Niang. And she's a goddess who is worshipped in a few villages in that region. And those villagers also worship Pangu Dawang, the great king Pangu, who's a god who's known all over China, but only in some parts of China do people actually worship him as one of the most important gods. So the point here is that in a polytheistic society, every place has its own specific local gods. So the god worshipped in one village is not necessarily the same god worshipped in other villages. And in all the polytheistic societies around the world, this is how it works. Every tribe, city, neighborhood, or even empire has its own local gods. So I remember when I went to a tribal area in Africa about 30 years ago, I spoke to a local man there, and he told me, I envy you for your God, because your God is the God of the whole universe, so that you're not scared wherever you go. I have my God under my house, so in my house I feel very safe, because I can worship my God who's underground and he protects me. But the further I go from my house, the less safe I feel, because I'm farther away from my God. If I go traveling on a business trip or go to the market, I start to worry a little. If I go a little further, I worry even more. If I go very far, I'm sure that I'll get sick and I may even die, because it's too hard for my house God to protect me. So I'm very scared to go very far away from my house. But, he told me, your God is everywhere. Wherever you go, he's with you. So I've noticed that you European people are never scared. You go so far from your homes, you come all the way from Africa, and you don't seem to be scared of anything at all. So this is one of the ideas that Moses brought. Well, he was also from Africa, actually. But he brought, through his revelation, that there is a God who's not only the little God of one place, but he's the God of the whole universe. So it doesn't matter where you go, God is there and he can protect you. So when God said to Moses, "Leave Egypt and go to the promised land, and I will be with you," well, that was unheard of at the time. If you moved to a different place, you'd have to deal with all kinds of other gods over there. So the God of Abraham and of Moses is a God who transcends all the local villages, tribes, localities, and empires. So this is one of the aspects of collective transcendence which is expressed by Moses. The people of God, the Hebrews, they were tied only to God and not to any specific place. So they could move anywhere in the world and not be afraid. Another revolutionary idea conveyed by the story of Moses is that this God is actually superior and more powerful than the emperor, far more powerful. In Egypt, just like in ancient China, the pharaoh was himself considered to be a god. The Chinese emperor in ancient times was known as the Son of Heaven, Tianzi, and he was as powerful as a god. He was himself one of the most powerful gods. And the Egyptian pharaoh was even seen to be an even more powerful god. Now, in this kind of religion, where the emperor is a god, it's considered that the more powerful a person is politically, that means that either that person is receiving greater blessings from the gods, or is actually God himself. So if a person has a lot of power or money, it means that the gods are blessing and protecting this person. He must be blessed. That's why this person is so powerful and so wealthy. Some kind of invisible power is coming to you that's giving you prosperity, happiness, material wealth, social status, military might, and everything like that. These are the things that show that God is on your side. So according to that mindset, the gods don't like the poor people and the weak people. If people are poor, if they're weak, if they're enslaved, well, that's because gods don't like them. Or their own gods are very weak. Because the more powerful gods are helping and protecting the powerful people, the emperor. So if the emperor has a lot of power and wealth, that's because he's favored by the gods or because he himself is a god. This is a widespread idea in traditional polytheistic societies and religions around the world. But in the story of Moses, the logic completely changes. The supreme God is actually on the side of the enslaved people, on the side of the poor. He's against the pharaoh. God says that even the most powerful emperor in the world is nothing compared to me, the supreme God. This God can protect the weak and can defeat the emperor. The spiritual reality of God transcends any political powers, empires, communities, or social classes. So it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, powerful or powerless, people are all the same in front of God. This is a powerful notion of collective transcendence. This concept has been incredibly powerful. Now think about it. The thousands of gods of Egypt and Palestine and the Middle East that were worshipped by people in ancient times, and the dozens of nations and tribes that worshipped those gods, well, now, after thousands of years, they have completely disappeared, and they're forgotten by everyone except for archaeologists and historians. But the Jewish people, the descendants of the Hebrews who worshipped the God of Moses, they are still around today. They haven't disappeared, and their God hasn't disappeared either. And over 2/3 of all the humans on our planet, including all the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims, they all consider themselves to be followers of the God of Moses. So Moses signaled perhaps one of the earliest appearances of a transcendent type of religion, which was reinforced during the axial age with the Hebrew prophets of Israel. The Old Testament contains many stories of these prophets who are said to have lived around the 8th century BC. So we have prophets such as Isaiah and others who were always criticizing their society in the name of God. They told people that the way they were doing things was wrong, that they were immoral and corrupt. They even criticized their religious practices, such as the way in which people slaughtered animals to worship God. They criticized people for being hypocritical, people who were always trying to show off that they were pious and religious, but actually they were not so in their heart at all. So these prophets were critical of the customs, the religion, and the political system of their own society. They criticized the conventional morality of the people. Instead, they emphasized the importance of believing in something else, of believing that in the future people would have a beautiful and peaceful world. So for this reason, people should have hope and faith, because God would bring peace and prosperity to humanity. This is another aspect of transcendence. Transcendence in terms of time, to transcend the darkness or the misery of the here and now, and instead to situate yourself in the long vision of history.